beyond us. We can work around not enough supplies, we don't need a new math curriculum, but we desperately need our staff. They are the lifeblood of this building. Dennett students did not cause this budget crisis, but they are the ones who are going to pay the price. We urge you to please support the level service budget and to continue to give our students, your children, the education they deserve.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to make a comment at this point? Just want to give everybody a moment to think about that. Just in response to that, it's not typical that we respond to public comment, but it's not the desire or the intention of this committee to cut any personnel from the budget tonight. We do intend to look through the budget line by line to make sure we can justify to the voters of the town where we're spending their money to keep the school functioning and to provide the best education we possibly can for the students of Plympton. If there's little areas here and there where we can save a few dollars, we might take advantage of those opportunities. But again, our intention is not to diminish our current full-time staff, part-time staff, auxiliary staff, you name it. We understand fully that it's the teachers, it's the aides, it's the people who work here day in and day out who make this building what it is. That's not a promise I can keep forever, but for this fiscal year, that's our intent as a committee. We'll engage in some debate. Maybe I will be proven wrong in my assumption here, but I've worked with this committee for 2 full years at this point, and we have the best intentions for this school and for the staff who make it function every day. So thank you for your comments. Hearing no further comments, I make a motion to close the public budget hearing. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. So the public budget hearing is closed. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to speak to the committee for this evening? Yes.
Is this just budgetary concerns? Or
no, this is general now. So okay. We're out of just talking about budget. This could be anything else.
Okay, I'm not sure it is going to be relevant if Mr. Veneto is not attending. Is he attending today? Or?
Mr. Veneto is ill.
He's ill. Okay, I'll leave it off till next round.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the approval of the minutes from January 27, 2025. Do I have a motion to accept?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any amendments or changes? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. School committee correspondence. I did receive correspondence from 5 different families in town pertaining to our conversation at the last school committee meeting about bullying and just the sense of belonging in this school and in our community. To thank the committee for taking up such an important matter and for discussing it with the tone and the seriousness that we did. So they wanted me to extend on to all of you a commendment for taking up that important cause. We are going to take an item out of order if the committee will so move. I would move to take the superintendent's report out of order.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, so we're just moving the budget up to the front of the meeting since that's what the majority of you are here for this evening. So hopefully at the conclusion, we can all high five and you can go home and we can carry on with the rest of the business and get everybody else out of here at a reasonable hour as well.
So the first item in your packet tonight under the superintendent's report is the K-6 students attending private parochial and charter school. For the past 4 years, there have been 4 students from Plympton attending private and or parochial school. The second chart in your packet for this evening is the school choice numbers and the number of students selecting school choice is 1 for the past 6 years in Plympton. The third item in your packet is the school budget, which contains information that we shared at our last presentation, but also has new updated information, particularly as it pertains to the assessments. Most of the new information occurs at on slide 12, but we're happy to go over any information from the previous budget that you may need to refer back to. What we currently have is a level service budget, and we also provided the costs of restoring positions, but those restored positions are not currently in the level service budget, just so that everyone is aware of what numbers we're referring to when we talk about the current budget that's presented. And I would ask the chair to recognize our Director of Finance.
Absolutely. The whole team is welcome
Thank you.
to come in and bring any color to the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. So this slide was in your presentation, your previous presentation. Again, the top left-hand side is the FY26 budget, broken down by the categories: regular ed, special ed, and vocational education in the columns. And then the rows are the broad categories that the Department of Education uses to categorize school spending: administration, instruction, student services, maintenance, benefits, fixed costs, and tuitions. So the top left-hand quadrant is the FY26 budget. The bottom left quadrant is the FY25 budget with that same breakdown. Top right-hand quadrant is the percent increase from 25 to 26, and the bottom right-hand side is the amount of increase from 25 to 26. So in this slideshow, again, this is a level service budget. We have adjusted the circuit breaker estimate to $117,272. Regular day is a 7.4% increase of $227,685. Special education reflects a 55.4% increase of $475,635. Salaries are 68.7% of the budget. The substitute lines have been increased based on a multi-year average. The utilities have been increased based on a multi-year average. The shared costs are included, but they're going to be voted on tomorrow night. The total budget is an increase of 19.5%, which is an increase of $774,321 more than last year. So in the FY26 level service budget, there is homeless transportation in there as a placeholder estimate. Out of district vocational, there's one student currently attending one of the agricultural schools, and we anticipate that student will continue going into their junior year. There are 3 placements budgeted in the budget for agricultural vocational students, and there's an April 1st deadline. I learned a couple weeks ago that the students have until March 15th to actually apply to the schools, and then until April 1st to let us know that they've applied, which I thought was horrible timing on the state's part. Doesn't help us one bit, but we'll know more as we get closer to April 1st. There are no school choice reductions that are taken. The next slide here was Pete's. So these were proposed costs that beyond the level service budget. So Pete was looking for a 1-to-1 aide to be returned into the budget, a math interventionist, 1.0 aide, and a 0.4 aide, for a total of $81,978. Again, these are above the level service budget.
And Sarah, if I could just add on to that, if we could go back to that slide. I know that Pete put this together for us, but it was at the request of the school committee in a recognition of the fact that we kind of ended up in a difficult position this year because of our staffing situation, how close to the bone we cut the budget last year. And these were some of the areas that we had asked just to see the numbers, to see what it would cost for us to invest back into the building, to really get it up to where we think it needs to be fully functional. Doesn't necessarily mean we can do it this year, but we wanted to put it up there so people can understand what we're still going without.
Thank you. So not included or updated in this budget, the restored positions on the previous slide are not in that total number for FY26. For additional staffing, there were none requested. There was the restoring of positions, but nothing in addition to that. The REAP grant, we haven't gotten any information from the federal government about the REAP grant. That is not in the budget. And then the circuit breaker offset is not in the actual line item budget. That will happen outside of the line item budget. We don't know anything about potential enrollment increases. For example, kindergarten numbers. I like to say there's not a person on the planet that can tell me how many kindergartners are gonna walk through the door in September. If you're one of those people that can tell me, I would love to know. For ELL needs, currently Plympton has a 0.5 FTE teacher that was approved after the FY25 budget, so it was not in the FY25 budget, but it has been included in the FY26 level service budget. The projected class sizes, this slide hasn't changed since our last presentation. So on the left-hand side of this is the 2024-25, the current school year, staffing levels and class sizes. On the right-hand side is the projected class sizes, number of students and staffing level with the level service budget and the estimated class sizes for next year. This is not my slide. I'll go through it with you if you'd like.
I'm happy to do this one, or if you'd
Want
like
me
to,
to do it?
Chris,
Sure.
yeah, go ahead.
So what we did is we took all of the Mass DESI profile data, and we look at the percentage of high need students for approximately 6 years, and we can see that it's going up and up and up, and this year was the most substantial one. I have it as 38.3, so I think that these need to be adjusted a little bit. Maybe Pete was looking at the other things, but what we're saying is 38.3% of the students are high needs in the district, and if we look at the earliest year that we can grab the data on, 24.7. So think about that difference in percentage of student population when it comes to high needs. And we know that the high needs category includes any student in one or more of the has to meet two of the categories, either EL, former EL, students with a disability, students that are homeless, students have any type of designated Department of Education assignment. So we can see that it's higher, it costs more, and it's more expensive to educate students of higher need. And so Plympton has seen an increase in this over the past 6 years. So that would be one reason why the budget would be a little bit higher as we go through the years.
Thank you. This next slide is just same as the last presentation, enrollment trends. So showing growth in the number of students year over year in Plympton. I was about to say last week. I wasn't here last week. 2 weeks ago, I presented the draft assessment to the Silver Lake School Committee. So this is just summary slides from that. So the draft operating assessment for Plympton would be $3,172,223.11, which is a $25,418.48% increase over FY25. The exempt capital for Plympton as part of the assessment process is $136,300.79. That is a decrease of $21,779.88. This is the debt for the middle school and high school building project, so this number is going to go down in year after year after year. The next slide is the total assessment. Plympton's total assessment for the Silver Lake Regional School District is $3,308,523.91, which is a $3,638.61 increase over FY25, or a 0.1% increase. On this next slide, the Dennett Elementary School budget, the town operating budget for FY26, and I have a note there that says it's not yet voted. The level service budget is $4,652,053, which is a $677,053 increase over last year, or 17%. I don't know where that number came from, I apologize. This gives the total cost of education for the town of Plympton, which is the operating budget for Dennett Elementary School and the assessment for Silver Lake Regional School District at $7,960,576.91, which is a 9.4% increase over FY25.
These are the capital requests that Principal Benito had presented as for consideration for FY26. The facility assessment, water upgrades, and playground management. Our next step is the school committee's review of this budget. Consider anything that the committee may want to request of the town with regards to capital projects. And Sarah has included on the last slide potential language to vote a budget this evening. Again, if the amounts change based upon your discussion tonight, the voting language would also need to change.
So I think most likely that number will change. Again, we sit precariously close to the position where we'll need a budget override in town to make the numbers work as they're presented tonight. Whether we need an override or not, again, the five of us need to be able to speak fluently to members of the town who will show up at town meeting to vote for the budget. If we need an override, then it needs to also be voted on at the ballot box as well. But we need to explain this to the Board of Selectmen, who are the only body in town who can actually vote to put an override on the ballot. And we need to explain where we're coming from with our numbers to see what the Finance Committee would like us to do as well, from the town side, to put the dollars together to make everything work. So I have a few questions. I'm sure the committee does as well. The first question I have is, Sarah, you mentioned that shared cost is in this budget. Is it the projected amount we may vote tomorrow, or is it the current amount from this fiscal year without adjustments?
It is the projected amount that will be voted tomorrow.
Okay, so that's already cooked into the number you gave us this evening. All right, that's very important for us to understand. I have a few other questions, but does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? You want me to? Well, the first one that I really want to go at is, we currently have the vocational set for 3 students to attend. We know that we have 1 student who's going to be attending. We have $105,000 allocated there. I believe it's the will of the town side and mine as well, that we reduce that number right off the bat by $70,000 and leave the funding for the 1 child we know about, and then if anyone else applies, we can deal with it from that end, instead of trying to hold on to this position right now and then potentially cutting it later on. I just think it offers a clearer lens for people to see what we're doing if we add the money back in, if another child does apply. So is 70,000 an appropriate adjustment to make if we take 2 kids out of vocational?
Hang on.
Yeah.
And I mean, we did speak to FinCom about that,
Yep.
and I think that's their general preference, and even for some of the other placeholders that we have in the budget, which aren't of that same amount. You know, if things come up during the year, we're going to deal with it during the year. I'm trying to see if we can get the budget in such that we can afford it within our budget and bounds.
$77,200 would
Okay.
be the cost of the 2 students.
And that includes the transport.
That is tuition and transportation.
So, any of you who've been through budgets with me before, you know I'm actually gonna do the math and keep track of this, so give me a minute. Now, John, you mentioned there was some other,
We have two transportation lines, we're holding at $1,000 each for homeless transportation, and it's labeled as something else. There's homeless and one other, I think,
Uh-huh.
do you know what lines those are, John?
They're in the 3,000s.
3,000s, thing.
McKinney-Vento transportation and foster care transportation, $1,000 each.
yeah.
So again, the town would prefer to take those up if the need arises, rather than have it cooked into
Yeah,
the
we have
budget.
a student that comes in and we end up having to get to the budget with that, and then get back to the town.
Okay. So that would be an adjustment of 2,000 for both of those, John? 1,000 for each of them, 2,000 total?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, does your spreadsheet have an updated final number now?
The updated final number is $4,492,849. I'm just trying to redo the
I
numbers
understand.
for the.
Yeah, I don't want to rush
the
you. I don't
motion.
want to make any mistakes along the way here. So, I know last time when we met, it was my mistake making the assumption at the Silver Lake level, but we had assumed 62% circuit breaker, and we've readjusted that number now up to the 75% here at Dennett. Can you tell us what number you arrived at here at Dennett?
So we have, the number that we have is approximately 117, as Sarah has in there.
Okay.
Today, we had to call the Department of Education because we do have students that we tuition in and out of districts.
Mhm.
And the question became, do we have these students be considered out-of-district students, or are they our students?
Right.
Because there's two ways of kind of looking at it. And we confirmed that if our students from this school go to one of our schools in another one of our districts, it's considered non-district placement because we're paying tuitions and transportation and
Okay.
things like that. So there is a little bit of a wiggle room now, because now we can put this student on that out-of-district circuit breaker, and that's about a $13,000 increase beyond the 117.
Okay.
It's not much, it's not certified, but it's something.
Okay. So we could take a $130,000 offset for circuit breaker?
You'd have the 117, plus I would give another 13,000, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would be pretty solid. I mean, we really were conservative.
Right.
And, because last time it was, so last time we were at 107, and so.
117.
At 62%.
Right,
and-
then we bumped it to 75.
But 117 isn't 75%.
No, because she wasn't
So-
including the students
Okay.
that were.
So there's if we jumped it to 75, it would have been 130, but then there was a question
Right,
on the 13.
so we didn't-
But then we clarified it, and
Yeah.
so 130 is 75.
Yep, we pulled him back.
Okay.
So-
And what are we thinking we're gonna get for the 240 or IDEA?
So the 240, we have
$60,000.
60,000, pretty much what we had last year.
Okay.
And again, but I think this
Even
year,
with the change in our special ed allocation between the districts?
yes, because you lost the kids that are going out of district
Okay.
to Silver Lake. So
Right.
any kids transferring out, you've lost those kids. And so we don't have a lot of kids to be able to claim.
No, I'm
Yeah.
surprised it didn't go down because we lost so many kids to Silver
No,
Lake.
it didn't this year.
Okay.
It didn't this year, so I'm
Okay.
gonna use the same figures. I think that we should be
It
okay.
went down last year.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
so that one goes.
That's where it-
That one goes
Year
as
by
a-
year.
Year by
Yeah.
year,
Not
whereas
in
the
one
other
year
one is
offset.
in arrears. Yeah.
And I'm pretty certain because we had that little, a couple of students or one student for transportation or whatever, we might be eligible for extraordinary relief. We're doing that right now.
Yeah. But again, that's not something we
Right,
can bank
right,
on.
right.
Right. So between the circuit breaker and the 240 grant at this point, I'm showing $190,000 in offsets that we can take from that budget number.
16, yep.
So my other question is, when we ran into our budgetary difficulty this year, we had that gigantic hole of $250,000. And we managed to work it down to now around $51,000. One of the things we applied to that was the extended school year tuition from Halifax. Are we able to use that as an offset for the FY26 budget also? Because won't we be realizing that?
We cut substantially, and I thank Christine for this. We really use data to determine whether or not students require ESY. And so your counts went from around 60 to around 9.
Okay.
So you saved a lot of money there. To save money, we're going to try to have just one ESY site.
Okay.
So you might not have that reimbursement. And we have to look at the transportation to see if it'd be worth it. But to hire teachers at different sites, only having 4 kids in one classroom and 4 kids in another, when we can just combine it and have 8 kids in a classroom, we're going to try to do that to save
I'd rather
everybody
do that
funds.
than get $36,000 in
Yeah.
reimbursement. Absolutely. Appreciate that work.
If we do get extraordinary relief, though, there are ways that we can substitute that money, because we have to spend it at the end of the year, with the 240 grant from this year, which we're spending money on, because that grant runs 2 years, where the extraordinary relief we have to use by the end of the fiscal year this year. So that might be an additional piece, but we won't know that until the end of March, just how much money that is, but it can be supplanted for the 240, and then the 240 runs 2 years to spend.
Right, right. But we might need that as a reserve
You might.
for a bump in the road,
Right.
which we've used in the past.
Right.
Right? So, go ahead,
But then
John.
it looks like in the budget, we have ESY professional staff at 30,600
That's how much it's gonna cost you for your students.
for our.
That's the projected amount.
For the 9 students.
But it may go down if I can get all of the kids in one site, and I have to look at that.
Okay.
Many of our parents transport themselves, the kids themselves, so they might not take opportunities for buses. So we'll have to see.
Okay.
Can I just ask that if you're going through any of the categories from the budget, you call out the code just so we can find where you might be referencing?
Okay. Under 2305.
2305?
Yeah. I assume that's the total. It's not the long number.
Yeah, 2305 teachers, right?
It's the
Yep.
third line.
Gotcha. Did anybody else have any other questions, comments, areas that you're looking at that we could potentially save some money without causing irreparable harm? Or any questions about how we're spending money so we
Yeah.
can explain it to
So,
people who ask
I'm
questions?
going to apologize up front. I spent some time on the last couple of days looking at this against our current budget. So I do acknowledge that there's been a lot of work done here, and that also we're in the process of moving everything over, so not everything ticks and ties exactly when you're looking at the 2 budgets, but I tried. So I did end up with some questions, so unfortunately we're going to kind of wander through those now. I will say, based on the work that I did through this, that I commend the administration for, I would say, looking at pretty much every line, because there are a lot of lines that had adjustments, and a lot of them were down. So they were small, but, you know, there was really some good, I would say, some good work done here to that. So with that, I think I'm going to skip any of the shared cost stuff, because we'll end up talking about that tomorrow.
Okay.
But, let's see. I assume the classroom teachers number at an 8% increase is because of the added ELL position that have slotted in there. Yeah, because it seemed a little higher than what we. Okay. So line 2320, we have speech salary, looks like that went up almost 40%. Is that for additional services or?
That is the salary for the speech teacher.
So, well, in this year's budget, it's 60,000, and in next year's budget, it's 83 change.
She's adding it. That was part of the shortfall from this year, because a day was added, and that was
Okay.
not in
So,
the original.
Additional,
budget.
so yeah, that makes sense. Great.
So you're saying 0.8 to a 1.0?
No, she went up to a 0.8 this year.
From a,
Point
from
six.
0.6?
From a 0.6.
Okay, all right, an extra day of work.
Yep.
Okay.
And then, of course, you know, we have the changes in the sublines, and so that all makes sense. I guess I wanted to better understand this, so I was looking at the paraprofessional lines, and what we're budgeting for next year is significantly down from what was in this year's budget. So I kind of want to understand what happened there. So for instance, we're at 2330 paraprofessionals. We have 65, 75 budgeted for the regular paras for this coming year. And the current year is $85,044. And additionally, for the special ed paras, we have 96,000 budgeted for the year coming up and 107,000 in this year's budget.
So with the salary lines, I relied on HR to provide me with who the staff are and what their salaries for FY26 would be. And on my salary spreadsheet, there are 7 aides. And those are the two numbers that you have in there, the $65,785 and the $96,087.
So was there turnover in the aides? Is that part of what might explain the differences, or?
One in, is it okay if I share?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sorry.
Didn't mean
We're
to
only
push you
gonna
under
get
the
through
bus.
this if we all
Totally
talk.
fine. One example was there was someone who was going to take a leave and then ended up resigning. So you might see that number there reflected in the two different numbers.
Okay.
So again, like we are only talking about 7 people, but at the same time, that could be a huge difference. And I believe it was a 0.4 position.
That looks to be the swing.
Yeah.
Okay, and we didn't refill it, so that's where we're at.
Correct.
2356, I assume this is professional development.
Yes.
We have DESI staff outside PD at 13,000. Does that exist in the current budget, or is that a net new item?
So outside PD is anytime a teacher goes to a workshop, takes a course. So that is course reimbursement plus any workshops that a teacher might do.
Then what's the next line down to?
The 20,
reimbursement?
the 20, I'm sorry. The tuition reimbursement line is tuition reimbursement. The outside PD, the $13,000, it comes off of. I apologize. I sent spreadsheets out to all the directors and
Yep.
principals, and then my spreadsheet pulls the information in from all those separate spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And Tricia, I think that's one of your lines.
Outside PD providers.
$13,000. The 2356, not the 2358 line. But he's asking about 2356.
PD and PD for faculty. PD for a new math program, and then PD for faculty to attend any professional development that they might need to go to.
Okay, so this is a net new cost for this year?
Yes, I think so.
The math, the PD for the new math program, yes.
So where does the other piece of it sit in the existing budget? Because I thought PD was just covered under tuition, but I may be not understanding. Yeah.
No, in the past, the principal had a workshop line. There was no PD line through the assistant superintendent's office
Yeah.
for any of our elementary schools. And the problem being that we have a number of achievement gaps that we need to close,
Mhm.
particularly in math.
Hmm.
So Tricia put together an estimate of what it would cost to get professional development
Yeah.
just for Plympton. And Sarah created that line so that we
Okay.
have money allocated specifically for that purpose.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know the REAP grant isn't in here. And typically, we haven't added in the rural aid from Massachusetts in our budget either because it's an unpredictable number. But we do typically get around $50,000, $58,000 here in Plympton for the rural aid, which I believe we have used in the past to offset professional development. Not saying that we should fully lean into it, but we might be able to allocate a portion of that to cut down on the number that we might be putting in directly from the budget this year. Since we're looking under stones to find money here and there, that might be one way that we want to address the issue.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm
But
just.
we would have to agree with guidance from the administration, like how much we would want to back off that $70,000 by and replace it with rural aid funds. So that's the conversation we're going to have if we want to pursue that. It's not just like we can nod about it and think about it. We actually have to come up with some direction and get some guidance from the admin on that. Is that something we're interested in doing?
Well, what else would we use there?
Why wouldn't it be?
Well, that's the aspect of it. We have been using those funds over the years to take care of operations here in the building. So I'm not quite sure exactly how we've utilized those funds in the past.
I apologize, neither am I. I asked the town accountant to send me the expenditures out of that account a couple weeks ago.
We haven't received it.
Have not yet.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I mean, I prefer to see it on a line item like this than covering off on, you know, like paying our heat.
Right?
Because you're gonna pay the heat every year, whereas this number could fluctuate. And it's you know, it's an absolutely admirable, you know, thing to do and to make sure that we train people and we help close the gaps. But I just need to make sure we understand where some of the numbers are coming from to add everything up.
Okay, and
So
Dr.
that's what I'm just trying to.
And Dr. Clifford, as you continue to roll out your curriculum adoption cycle, this number could become a predictable number in the budget year in and year out, depending on what's being adopted, right?
Generally speaking, in districts, there's generally 4 to 5 line items under the assistant superintendent.
Mhm.
One of them is professional development. Usually another one's textbooks, instructional materials. Those generally stay the same for the most part every year, because as you illustrate, that's why the whole curriculum review piece, that's why I proposed that in the fall and to discuss that so that we could make budgetary plans as things went from year to year, not have all of a sudden a large sum of money that we need
Peaks
to
and
have for
valleys.
some curriculum,
Right.
you know. Yeah.
And I know Title II is not a huge amount of money for Plympton. I think it's like $3,000 or $4,000 total.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money, and it's really used for the induction program and
Okay.
for mentors to
Right.
really help new teachers.
You already have that focused in
Yeah,
on that.
yep.
Okay.
Next section down, 2358.
That could be another area of advocacy for anybody who's interested, is the rural aid package. It's supposed to be fully funded at $60 million a year. Last year, we had it at $15 million. So we could quadruple the amount of money that Plympton gets. It could be close to $200,000 per year if they finally pass the legislation. And it's been reintroduced at the State House, so if you want to make a couple phone calls or send some emails for rural aid, we benefit from it tremendously here in Plympton.
So line 2358 says PES PD contracted services for 70,000.
Yeah, so let me outline those pieces. So things that are included in there, for instance, would be contracting with the Stern Center for Horton Gillingham classroom level training. So again, focusing on the science of reading. So if we look at our scores ELA over the past 4 years, particularly in spring of '24, if you look at 3 through 6 here, it's 54% of kids that would be considered proficient. Let's not forget that's 46 that aren't reading at grade level over the 3 through 6. It's a broad stroke, it's a broad scope there, but there are needs within that, and in '23 it was 52% kids reading at grade level through grades 3 through 6. So it's concerning, obviously, if you're a parent of a child that's in the 48% that's not reading at grade level. So the Horton Gillingham classroom level training is to help focus more on the phonics piece, the science of reading piece. And then also the OG associates level, that's included there. That's training for special ed teachers to have Horton Gillingham training so that if you have children with dyslexia, you can provide specialized instructions to help them. Another piece here is Hill for Literacy Year 2 core program review. So we've contracted with Hill for Literacy this year. They did a needs assessment, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And we're going to create a literacy plan next week. Next year, the goal is to really look at literacy programs that are really high-quality instructional materials that are curate rated, and this is to also, that money is there to help, to pay Hill to help us do that huge work in 4 different districts. RBT is another piece that's underneath there, Research for Better Teaching. So contractually, we have teachers in their first 3 years take the Skillful Teacher or to pay for that course. That's embedded in there. Another piece that we're doing too is what's called ATSR. It's Analyzing Teaching for Student Results. All the evaluators are taking this class through Research for Better Teaching to provide feedback to teachers on how they can improve their teaching. And then also some other pieces here. I've included some summer work that we could potentially do to address some of the gaps in both curriculum and instructional pieces. So it's all of those kinds of things that are a part of this.
And this is a net new expense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think all of this is great. I guess where I find a problem with it is simply that I'm finding it by digging through the budget, and that it's not brought out so that can be part of the discussions that we end up having with the town, and trying to explain why we have, a $700,000 increase on a $4 million budget. So I'm not saying that the $85,000 isn't money really well spent and worth the investment in our teaching staff and our students, but I think we need to get tighter and cleaner on what is actually made up, because what we end up saying is, oh, it's all special ed, and it's not. Not when we're already at 85,000 of net new expenditures coming in the budget. And again, I completely credit everyone who worked on this budget, because I can see that it looks like almost every line was touched, that someone thought about it, looked at the prior year, tried to adjust expenses, because there's lots of lines that go down. But I really do need the clarity coming out at the beginning of the budget cycle about where, and having a good message to be able to explain that. We're doing this in order to make the school that much better, and much better for the students. And that's an investment. It's not just paying a tuition because that's what we have to pay. So I think it's a really good story, but I shouldn't have to dig through the budget to find it.
So I've got the spreadsheet open, and there's a sheet there, there's a little piece there with it says here are some figures that are a bit updated, and it's got the circuit breaker in there. That should be taken out, and we should that was an error on our part, on my department's part, and I own that. There's a student there that transferred up. Those were the initial figures. The final figures came out, and that's the 130.
The one we
that we
just
talked
talked
about.
about.
Yes.
It's the
So I
130.
wanted to make sure of that. So, and that's a big chunk. So I'm not sure if that helps.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I just had a couple more little questions. I don't know where I saw it in here, but I did see it. So I think I saw an addition for food services salary, and is that just in order to properly so that we're paying a portion of that. Forget what that is.
Food services and pupil services, which is line 3,400. The $2,000 in there is for the compostable trays,
Yeah.
which is an expense
Yeah.
that is solely Plympton's expense.
I think I know who's responsible for that. Two of them are sitting at the table.
Yeah, I'm happy that we don't use polystyrene foam here. Hopefully that'll become a statewide initiative as
So
well.
I thought I also saw for the, there was another number in here for food services.
It would be in the shared cost up
Yeah.
at the top.
Oh, and I said I wasn't
And,
gonna talk about share cost.
Food service supervision
Yeah,
and the,
yeah.
the
3,000 pupil services. And so was that in the budget before it was just buried in the line? Or are we finally paying what we should be paying?
So with the shared cost budget, there was a new shared cost agreement last year, and there were positions that were moved into the shared cost budget.
Yeah.
So, but the food service supervision, we're going to be moving out of the budget out of the operating budget into food service revolving. Silver Lake voted on that last week, and the joint committee needs to vote on that tomorrow night.
Yeah. Budget has too many lines. So I guess the only other question I had is on, in the existing budget, we have for special ed, we have public schools, public school programs, mass schools, public school programs, collaboratives, and tuition services sped. And in the new budget, that sits on 2 lines? Is that correct? Collaboratives and tuition? Of course, I can't find it.
So all of those lines exist. Tuition to mass schools, private day, out of state, private day,
Yep.
in-state, private residential, and collaboratives.
Yep.
And the students for Plympton for next year are only going to Massachusetts schools or collaboratives.
Okay. Oh, I can't
Do you
find
want to take a breath?
it. Yeah, go for it. I'll see if I can find my numbers.
So Sarah, if we go back to utilities, the 2120, 2130 line, have we seen?
Utilities should be in 4,000s.
Yeah, 40,000, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
4120.
Okay. Go ahead, quiz me on
4130.
budget lines, 4130 and 40.
Have we realized any savings on electricity with the installation of the solar panels?
To be honest, this is not something I have a good answer for, because we were looking at significant savings last year, and then all of a sudden we got, I think it was a $68,000 bill. So I haven't done a deep dive into the Plympton electricity line. So that number that I have there, the 33,300, is, I took the 4-year average.
We have 65,000 for electric.
I'm sorry. Yes, I do. I was reading 2 lines above. So the $65,000 for electricity is based off of a 4-year average. Which, and again, next year I would do the same thing, and so if there was a decrease for this year, I would have
It
to.
hasn't been increasing, which suggests that you're starting to see that. And I mean, so again, remember what we got. So
Locked in a rate.
we locked in a rate for power generation, which is only a piece of it. But we locked in 6.5 cents. And we know what we're paying is a lot more than 6.5 cents.
Right.
But and the district has a power purchase agreement, but that's, I think, 11 cents. So there should be a savings, but it's not gonna be on everything for the period that we're getting it. It's a piece of it. So if we're doing an average of every 4 years, I mean, I did notice that last year's budget, it didn't go up. and we all know that electric went up. And this year, it's gone down a little bit again, and so you're probably seeing it starting to come off because of how you're doing the averages. And it's maybe you can sort of see that in the budget too, that we don't have the whole thing encumbered. So my guess is there might be some money left over in that line item as we get closer to the end of the year, especially since we'll be buying more and more of the power from the panels because we're getting into peak season.
I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that we did go through that program to try and help offset the cost of electricity in the building, to help save our taxpayers in Plympton some of the funds. But we also did it for the educational resource that it provides for the students every day, seeing that their school is partially powered by solar as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I found my spot.
Back to John.
So for the 3 lines that we have in the current budget to the 2 lines that we have numbers on in the existing budget under the 9,000 tuition, I mean, it's I don't see a huge tuition increase. I mean, you're at 170, 220, and we're at, well, it's 100,000. Am I reading that right, or from the existing lines in our budget, did the money go under a different line?
So, I gave spreadsheets out to
Yeah.
all the directors and principals. So these 2 lines here are things that my spreadsheet pulled off of Dr. Panarisi's spreadsheet, and perhaps she has better insight into.
So included in the costs that we have, we also put if a student needs a one-to-one para,
Yeah.
it's embedded into the tuition. The transportation is separate.
Right.
Than the actual tuition cost. So I just took some screenshots of my budget sheets so that I could share them so that you can see the actual. I'm just going to redact the student initials
Yeah.
on them.
Right.
But the actual budget sheets that are presented and that are created have over 32 different lines on them for each one of the districts. And I would send you the whole package, but it's everybody's. If I could find a way to just extract the Dennett ones, I would. But I'm going to send you screenshots of it so you
That's
can
great.
see it.
Something else to keep in mind is that the special ed lines last year included things that I have moved. So if you look, those 9,000 tuition lines last year included ESY because we didn't have anywhere else to put it.
Right.
And so that cost for ESY
Oh, so-
now lives on its
So
own.
that 30 came out, so we're looking at more at 150 instead of 120. Okay. 100, 130. Okay.
And contracted services was split up into psych services and other student services. So there were pieces that moved to an appropriate line.
Okay. Thank you. So you don't think that's enough?
Anybody else? Okay. Rob?
I'm good. Thank you.
So, my math might be wrong, but with the $190,000 in offsets from circuit breaker and the 240 grant, and with taking out the $77,200 for vocational and $2,000 for transportation, I have us at an overall increase year over year of $505,121 or so. Does that sound right? Which is like a 12.5% increase.
What was it again, Jason?
505, 121.
Let's just say our budget last year was $4 million. Again, we overran that budget by $250,000 by October. That's where I have us sitting right now, unless we want to do something else with the numbers.
It's 4.5.
Is it, how much?
Is that what you have, 4.5?
Yeah, basically, $4.5 million budget.
Okay. Hold on. So you're taking the original 4, adding that 5 to it, not including the overrun?
I could be off, that's why I want you guys checking me.
Do you want my numbers?
Yeah, Sarah, I'd love your numbers, you're the professional.
But I just have a spreadsheet that does all the math for me.
Mhm.
So if you look at the slide, the first number on the slide would be $4,492,849. That number's repeated twice on the slide. The next number down would be $190,272 for the grants and revolving. Circuit breaker would be $130,272. Grants and revolving $60,000 for a total operating budget of $4,683,121.
And that took out the 2 vote seats
Yes.
and the 2 transportation lines.
Yes.
Okay.
492. 849.
492?
Yes, 4,492,849.
Thank you.
And
Can I
2
look on your
cents.
paper, Jill?
4,492. My nines and my fours.
Right.
are bleeding into each other.
Yep. So that's the 4.5 million that came up. After the offsets, the reductions in the offsets, basically the charge to the town would be 4.5 million. Thank you. 4,492,149.
849.
800? Thank you, Sarah.
Do you want me to run through the numbers one more time?
Yes.
Yep.
So, the first 2 numbers would be $4,492,849. The third number is $190,272. The circuit breaker is $130,272. Grants and revolving $60,000 for a total of $4,683. I'm sorry, $4,683,121.
The only other question that I had was, Mr. Penderby, did you have an opportunity to sort of take a look at our students that we're expecting for next year?
Yes,
And what
I
that
did.
might do for
Yeah, I
circuit
checked
breaker?
in, and we do not have any. I even checked with Early Childhood Intervention, an external organization, to say, do you have any students? And right now, there are none. I do keep a running sheet of all the budgeted things that are beyond what our budget are now, and I can separate that out actually when I send this out to show you exactly what we've spent money on beyond the budget for fiscal year '25. It might help answer some questions for the fiscal year '26 budgeting.
And I think the other thing we had talked about last time was doing a back of envelope
The
of any
4683,
net
the
increase
reduction.
in circuit breaker because we have additional expenses that we're doing in
Right.
'26.
Right.
And part of my thinking on that is that, we may be asking the town to draw on stabilization in order to help fund the budget. And and again, we all know it's not guaranteed, but if we expect that there's going to be
Right.
X amount more in
Right.
circuit breaker
Nope.
for '27 because of '26, then that helps to, in my mind at least, that helps to offset. Whether it helps in anyone else's, I don't know. But
Exactly. So right now, if I look at the special education budget sheets that my bookkeeper has given me, like for Plympton, just for special education, it looks like I'm off $75,000. If I'm going to be getting back $30,000 of that for the unexpected costs circuit breaker that comes out in March, and they notify us by the end of March if we have it or not. That's gonna drag that down. It's also, we're gonna take a look at PACES services and things like that. If kids don't use all their PACES services, some kids are not using all their transportation right now, so those costs will go down, but we don't know that until the end of the year.
Yeah.
So we could take a coin toss and do a gamble and say, you know what, we're probably gonna get extraordinary costs, because we do have a real life,
Yeah.
extraordinary cost.
I guess more what I'm thinking about is what we get in '27. So like we have known, in other words, we have a net increase in
Yep.
special ed
Right.
going into '26. And so
Yep.
assuming we have that through '26, we will get a
So-
reimbursement in '27. Because what I'm trying to get at is, let's just say it's gonna be 50,000 in it, that we estimate, again,
Right.
estimate, not guaranteed, then that offsets the concern that at least 50,000 of that may not be, like, we don't like to fund continuing operating expenses out
Right.
of stabilization. That's not a great plan.
No, and we have to also think of maintenance of effort. So we do count on that 240 grand, right?
Yep.
And we have to make maintenance of effort. And this year was a stretch. Even with all of those kids moving out, we had to put in 3 pieces of data for transportation, 3 pieces of data for tuitions, all for every kid that left and transferred out to the middle school or the high school, which
Right.
we did. So we made maintenance of effort this year. But the district and the Department of Education expects you to spend more money for special education next year than you did this year. That's what the expectation is. So that's, I think, we have to be careful of, is, what is the increase, what is the percentage of increase, and why is it increasing? And as we go through the budget process more and more, and we have more defined line items, thank you, Sarah, we'll be able to really pinpoint where those higher costs are coming from, and then perhaps maybe have interventions to circumvent where they are. Right now, we have a really good, stable, out-of-district population, so that's gonna be stable. But again, next year, when I go to apply for that grant, what's gonna happen is they're gonna take last year's budget, and they're gonna look at special education costs, and they're gonna say, did you spend more or did you spend less? Because if you spent less, you're not making maintenance of effort. And then they're not gonna give me the money, unless, it was a little bit of a struggle this year.
Yeah, but we're spending quite a bit more
Right.
in '26.
Just the salaries alone should be enough to cover it. The
Yeah.
special education teacher salaries, because I grabbed those out,
Yeah.
right? Even if we do go down with students being out of district, we do have one student that we're gonna be spending more money on that was unexpected. Kids move in, kids get services, kids get one-to-ones, right? Moving kids, they have IEPs, we have to honor those IEPs and provide the same services, plus the annual increase in salaries for special education staff. So we should be okay, but that is something that's monitored by the state.
I think part of the difficulty is, in order to get the FY '25 maintenance of effort calculation done, FY '25 had to be compared to FY '23. Next year, FY '26 is going to be compared to FY '24, and FY '25 is when we did the restructuring. So
I see.
maintenance of effort is going to be really easy in FY '27.
What is our, so 3.975 is FY '24-25, but then we went over by $250,000, so is it actually 4.2, or is it 3.9?
Well, then we did the budget freeze. So we cut back on what we anticipate spending for this school year. We wrapped into it the extended school year tuition that we received from Halifax. If you remember, we talked about how some 240 and circuit breaker monies can roll over from one year to the next. We utilized a big chunk of that to pay for this year's operating costs.
Sure.
We also used the $50,000 we had in the special ed stabilization fund. So we pulled on a lot of areas to try and get that down to $51,000 that we're still in the hole for this fiscal year.
Right.
that we're gonna have to go to special town meeting to get funding for.
But when we're talking about an increase, 18%, is it over the 4.2, is it over the 3.9?
So
It's over the original budget.
But you're right, I mean, we've had that now for a couple of years in the budget where we had an overage, and as a
Right.
result, and it goes back to, remember that budget? Remember the zero budget we did?
Yeah.
That one, we ended up being, that ended up being too good, because the way that we have to budget, we couldn't take these sort of, like, we should never have gone down as much as we did in our special ed tuition, our special ed line, but that's what the cost was. We couldn't put it anywhere. We already put the 50,000 away. And then we had that jump up, but if you look at it compared to 2 years back, it wasn't a huge jump. It's just that we had to make up for the savings as well as the increase. And it's the same thing here. So you're right. I mean, if you're looking at assuming everything was in this year's budget, our increase wouldn't be as bad.
It'd be 10%.
Less, I think.
Well, off of 4.6, it'd be 10%. Well, if you minus out the 4.5,
It'd be-
you're looking at 8%.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this is going on in school districts across the state. You know, there's towns contemplating overrides, there's towns already committed to overrides, there's towns that will be facing devastating cuts to their school systems if overrides don't pass, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to try and avoid pushing our own town into that situation, to see if we could come up with a number that meets the town's ability to pay for it without having to go there. And as John mentioned, potentially looking at using some stabilization dollars to help us meet this year's budget instead of dipping into an override.
And what is that threshold?
What is the threshold of how much? And that's up to FinCom. And we do have a meeting with FinCom on March 10th, which right after that meeting, the Board of Selectmen will have to probably put onto the warrant whether or not we're going for an override. So
And the other,
we're close to it, but we might be just at the point that we're under that, making that necessary.
I mean, the mistake that a town can get into in doing overrides is that they do an override to meet exactly what's in front of them right now. And then the next year, or maybe 2 years, they're doing it again because they have to do it. So, you know, I'm very hesitant about an override until we have the opportunity to truly think it through 5 to 7 years out and understand not just for the schools, but for the town and for everything else it needs, what you need to be able to do with that, and then be able to educate the town on what that is. I mean, I think going in 3 months and just saying, oh, we need an extra $150,000 for the school, I don't think it will pass. I don't think at all once they get, I mean, it'll pass in town meeting, but it will not pass at the ballot box. And so, overrides, I think, take 15 to 18 months to put together, with the town working very closely with all the departments to understand what the needs are 5 years out. Because you can't, it's not easy for the homeowner, particularly, you know, the residents that are living on fixed income, to be able to deal with, you know, a 6% increase on their taxes versus the 2.5. The 2.5 is hard enough. But we have we have these costs. If you look through the line items in the budget, there's costs that are going up more than 2.5%, and everything above 2.5% is getting us another step closer to that, and everything's more expensive. And so those costs get passed down and end up on this budget. So my hope is we can get through this budget cycle and make it work, and then go back to the drawing board and figure out what else we need to do over time to make sure that we can keep it going.
So, does anybody from the audience have anything they'd like to contribute at this point, or would you like us to make the motion and try and make this official? Just want to give you an opportunity.
Can I just ask a question?
Mhm.
So, last year, out-of-district placements were voted by the Governor's Council, were allowed by the Governor's Council to go up, I think it was 4.7%. And the year before, out-of-district placements I think it was something like 15%.
Yep.
So how is that, I know that's not a town, obviously not a town thing, but it impacts everyone. So if over the last 2 years they've gone up almost 20%, but towns can only increase their budgets by 2.5%, how is that anything? Like it's not tenable.
It's not, and that's why, you know, I've been working with Max Page directly. You know, I'm the president of the Mass Association of School Committees. I've been working with Mary Bork, who's the president of the Mass Association of School Superintendents, Margaret Driscoll from MASBO, Steve Sherritt from MAVA. Like, we're all pushing in the same direction right now with multiple areas of reform. You know, one of the areas we were pushing for was release of some of the fair share amendment dollars. And we actually did see some of that in Governor Healy's House 1, her version of the budget. It wasn't necessarily very helpful for Plympton, right? A lot of it went to some special ed circuit breaker funding. Some of it went to some CTE expansion programs that are desperately needed throughout the state. There's even calls on her right now to release some of the rainy day funds because it is pouring in the municipalities across the state. We had over 80 towns and cities last year go for overrides. About 40% of them passed, right? And we've heard from colleagues in other districts where the overrides didn't pass and what that did to the education in those towns. There's more towns this year that are approaching overrides than even last year. So it's a historic high. The highest it's been since even 2008, which was the last financial crisis we had.
So is there, I guess, I don't know if I'm the only one, but is there anything the community can do to
It's just
speak
making
to-
phone calls to your state legislators, sending an email. Don't bother with those canned emails. You know, I get them too sometimes. Hey, just type your name in here and we'll send the email. They don't work. Most staffers just delete them. They don't even look at them. But if you pick up the phone, if you send a 2 or 3 sentence email, just expressing how it's affecting your town, how it's affecting your classroom, how it's affecting your students, those are the most powerful advocacy ways. And most of our legislators have office hours in district as well. You know, Senator Fernandez was just here last Saturday, you know, speaking at the townhouse, and there was a lot of us who went up and spoke to him. And he's actually vice chair of the Rural Caucus, so he's very aware of the rural aid package. You know, leaning into these little dollar pockets might help a little bit, but what really needs to happen is Chapter 70 reform and overhaul, complete. You know, the Student Opportunity Act did an awesome job for those gateway cities that it was really trying to address, those low-income students, the ELL students, but it left a lot of the suburban districts in the lurch, and a lot of the rural communities in the lurch. We need to look at exactly what you're mentioning. How can a required net school spending go up by more than 2.5% when we're constrained by Proposition 2.5, right? But we're also looking at circuit breaker. Like, if you're going to allow circuit break, the tuition of out-of-district private special ed schools in Massachusetts to go up by double digits, why don't you pay for 90% of it instead of 75? Why don't we lower the threshold from what it's getting close to $56,000 before you even qualify, back down to $40,000, $30,000. We do need to keep some skin in the game to make sure that we're being judicious with the allocations of those services and those funds. But the state could pay a bigger share of that. Where's those revenues going to come from the state? Well, the past couple tax revenues have actually been positive in the past 2 months. For the past 24 months, it's been pretty sour, right? Which is why we're looking at those fair share dollars, but we're also looking at rainy day account. Just the interest rate now being made off of the rainy day account up at the State House is hundreds of millions of dollars per year, right? So let's put them to use in our time of crisis, because it is pouring in municipalities. We're seeing it across the state. So we are working with the Teachers Association and with the AFT Mass. You know, it's a broad-based coalition of people who are all ringing the bell and chanting the same slogan that we're drowning out here.
We just got notice today, Vanpool is raising their transportation rates by 10%.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's nothing you can do about that. You don't have any Vanpool, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, there was another article recently that one district went from paying $276 per day per bus to $450 per day per bus. A 1 year change in the cost of their transportation. Yeah, we're in crisis mode. You know, we felt it last year. We felt it here. We cut down to the bone. I told you all I thought we'd be headed for an override definitely this year. You know, we might be able to dodge that situation with the numbers I'm starting to see come together from Silver Lake and from Dennett. But that doesn't mean next year is going to have, you know, somebody with a magic wand just taking care of this issue for us. It might come down to us putting our heads together and advocating. But if we could get more funds from the state, it would benefit everyone, all 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. Any other questions or comments before we take a vote?
Question. Is this budget also going to be the budget freeze that we had the year before? Isn't that how we saved last year when we were in this situation, or now is that carrying over?
No. So I talked to Principal Veneto, and the funds that we had allocated for this current fiscal year, this is above and beyond what we allocated for this year. And I think John quite properly called out the attention to detail we saw the administration pay to every single line. We don't want to end up in the same situation we ended up in October again, where we're realizing, oh, we cut too close to the bone, we're in a deficit again. This budget does not have that same constraints to it. Well, we're still trying to be mindful of where we are with the town and the ability to get this passed and the ability to potentially pass this without the need for an override. So yes, this does not include us starting from day one with a budget freeze. Anybody else?
What's the math interventionist and the para that wasn't included in this budget? How does that play into that? Because that seems like that is another impact to the students.
Yeah, we would love to put in that $81,000 in restoration of positions at this point, but I believe the will of the committee is to preserve the current staff we have right now. And as you heard Dr. Clifford say, we're allocating close to $70,000 in professional development training and curriculum adoption in the area of mathematics specifically. So hopefully we can see some of those tier 1 and tier 2 interventions directly in the classroom that we might be missing because of the loss of an interventionist. I work in a school, I'm a teacher myself, I understand the importance of paraprofessionals and interventionists and specialists. But if you have a classroom teacher who has the resources they need and the training they need, right now that's where I, as one voting member of this committee, need to put the resources of my town behind.
Sorry, I'm going to ask one more thing. Wouldn't that kind of like a math or reading, wouldn't that be, I don't want to come off in a bad way, but what about art and music and all of those things that are like niceties, like I feel anyways, wouldn't that benefit our kids more to have extra support in that opposed to doing art and music that they do in their class?
Yeah, all the research in the world would say no.
Okay.
That getting rid of the arts would not benefit us in the way that you might think it would in the curriculum areas. And having those moments in the day, for some students, that's the only reason they come to school every day is for their art or their music class, and we get to have them in English and math because they came for art class or music class. But it also develops other portions of the brain and tries to meet the child as a whole human being. We've worked really hard to get music and band back into the Dennett because last time we found ourselves in a budget crisis, those were the items that went first. And trying to put those items back into a budget is exceedingly difficult. To raise by 10% a budget to get music and band back into a building is a very difficult pull. So I totally understand where you're coming from, but I don't think we're willing to entertain that.
I think the other piece is there's a financial reality to it too. You can't just take that out and not have a cost associated with taking it out. So you have unemployment and other things that end up costing. So you don't get a dollar for dollar and then to transfer it. So that's the other piece that isn't good.
Unfortunately, being involved, this is my 20th budget on school committee, and the gross reality is it's for every 3 people you're really only saving 2 salaries because of the unemployment insurance that you have to pay into. You know, it becomes a very macabre math. So we'd like to preserve the family we have, because that's what this is. You know, the staff here is a family, and they work well together. We'd like to keep them together intact the way they are right now, and hopefully add to it in years to come, and make this place even better than it is today.
So before you go and make a motion, can I make one comment?
Please?
I would prefer to wait till our next meeting to vote the budget. And the reason I would like to do that is we still have to see how things come out at Silver Lake. And we also have the shared cost meeting tomorrow night, which I'm very excited about getting to do 2 nights in a row. Because I'd like to see how that comes out before we make a final decision on not adding any of that list back in.
Okay. So you want to leave the door open to potentially adding some of that stuff back in if numbers work out in the other 2 budgets that you have?
I gotta hold on to something.
Okay. So John's basically saying he wants to hold off, not so we can cut deeper, but so maybe we could add more in. I just want everyone in the audience to understand.
Yeah, and the concept is first of all, that we have an assumed share cost budget built into this budget, and depending on what happens at the meeting tomorrow night, which is for the Union 31 as well as Silver Lake to weigh in on the shared cost budget, there could be adjustments there, and then there also could be adjustments at Silver Lake, and we have to look at not just our budget here, but we look at total cost of education. And if Silver Lake miraculously goes down some, then that may free up a little bit of room. And it also allows us to go and talk with FinCom
Yep.
on March 10th and bring them
Come back on
back
the
some
26th.
numbers that I think they will be less ill about. I'm not gonna say happy, but I think, you know, I think we have something that we can work with. But I would like to leave us that option to deal with it. And I promise that if everything comes back the way we are, we're not gonna spend an hour and 25 minutes talking through it
Appreciate
again
that.
at the end of March.
Any objection to John's idea?
I agree.
Okay. Okay.
I just have a quick question. I was just thinking about the math interventionist, that one position specifically. And as much as like training is like really helpful for all the teachers, and I think this is kind of like probably a question we should ask them. I think sometimes a training's great, you pick up a few things, you try and use them as best you can. But having a specialist that can come into your room and have that extra face in the room to go to all the different classes
Yep.
and actually work with children. I wonder if the money's better spent having the additional staff member. I mean, ideally you'd like to have both, and again, I think it's up to the staff what they think would be potentially more helpful if they have a say in that. But I just have found too, because I'm a teacher in another town as well, and the more like staff members you have to be able to spread around and help, particularly if there are specialists in that area, I feel like having them every day in the building versus a one-time training where you kind of get some stuff out of it, which is great. I don't know, it could be something where you get a little bit more for your money. So again, this is something I just talking out loud here, but
No, that's the way we hold these meetings, as long as everyone's polite and wants to add to the conversation, we're happy to entertain ideas. I just want to remind you, the committee is the group who asked for those to be put into the presentation, because we acknowledge that as well, right? But I don't want to give like numbers, because I don't even know how close. We are precariously close right now to needing an override with the numbers we have, right? So John's plan makes even more sense with your input for us to be able to look at that and come back and have a deeper conversation on March 26th about how we want to proceed.
I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're suggesting we stand it back in. I think you're suggesting to swap it for PD and math.
I think that would be a conversation to see which one would be more beneficial to the town, and
No,
Just
I did understand that. I do appreciate the clarification for anybody who missed that. That's something that we'll have to consider.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
But we also have to look at the long-term implications of an additional staff member and adjusting that line. That could be a continuous line for the curriculum adoption cycle and how it might impact future years as well. right? So we can investigate that and look at it, but we need to look into it. It's a not as simple, unfortunately, as a dollar for dollar change out. But definitely we're open to the idea. So thank you. All right, so we got somebody else?
Yep.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
To work off of this as well with personnel, a PD or a training can't provide sub-coverage. And I'm not advocating for our teachers to have to cover for each other more than they already are, but that's an additional benefit and cost offset by having a human being in the room as opposed to investing in training. And it will save money on site.
I appreciate the input. Thank you for that. Anybody else? All right, so I'm going to say we're done with the budget for this evening. Sarah, do you have something you need from us tonight?
Well, just to clarify,
Yep.
before the March 26th budget, I'm going to redo the line items, removing the $77,200 for the vocational transportation and tuition, and the $2,000 for the homeless transportation, and then maybe we'll have some information about REAP or I'll know more about rural aid once I hear back from the town.
That'd be great. Okay. Yeah, what's up?
I have one
Go ahead.
I know nothing about Halifax, but I know here, she was talking about art and music. When you share a music teacher with Halifax, what's the possibility of sharing an art teacher with Halifax? Do they have full-time there? Like, how does that work out? I know she's only part-time here, but do we have 2 part-timers that could be full-time? Is that equal or make it more or less?
Yeah, I don't know how Halifax would affect how we're going to run ourselves next year.
We don't share any longer because I don't think they still have band.
It was band they shared.
Yeah.
Just band?
It was just band.
Yeah.
just band.
Yep.
Got it.
So, I think we're in good shape right now. All right? That solves your problem, answer your question? All right, awesome. All right, so we're going to move on with the rest of the agenda, which is not super exciting. So if you'd like to avail yourself of this moment to get up and go, please feel free. We will be back here on March 26th to vote the budget. Thank you for caring so much about your schools. Appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you.
All right, you're going to bring us back to the agenda, everybody. You're going to bring us up to policy. And I'm going to ask you guys to make a motion to waive the actual reading of the policies.
So moved.
Okay, I have a so moved by John, a second by Rod?
Yep, sure.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, thank you so much. I would like to make a motion to accept as a second read policy D, E, D, B, E, H, E, E, F, C, E, F, D, E, H, A, E, H, B, G, B, E, E, I, J, N, D, C, J, I, C, J, K, D, C, K, B, C, B, K, H, B, and K, H, C. Someone would say so moved.
So moved.
All right, so moved by John. Do we have a second?
Hold on. I moved
By
it.
Dan, you moved it? We
I
don't want to
don't care.
confuse anybody. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Jeez, thanks, guys. My eyes, Joe, it's terrible. It's
No,
terrible.
it's hard. It's hard.
All right, negotiations.
We have a meeting on the March 26th.
One before that.
Right before the meeting?
We have one before that.
March 13th.
13th.
13th and the 26th.
So the preliminary meeting on March 13th with the attorney
Okay.
and Union 31 and Plympton.
All right. On Union 31, we have a joint meeting tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock in a large group room upstairs at the high school to discuss the shared cost budget. PAC.
Last meeting was on 6th. Director and treasurer reviews were completed. Both exemplary audits from DESI included ELL audit and financial systems review, both passed. Enrollment's at 117. They did a recent tour with Kathy and Dylan for the property, and they had a couple of turnovers in staff, but they are fully staffed. Everyone that left was replaced. One resigned, one hired, one retired, one hired, and they are fully staffed with 117 students. They still have some wiggle room if they get additional before they have to rehire anybody else.
Okay.
That's it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dan. All right, capital improvement. John, have you scheduled with Mike to come out to town properties yet?
I have not, but we can get him on the 13th or the 20th.
Well, I need to reach out to him to see his
Yeah.
availabilities, but are those dates that would work
Yeah,
for you?
13th and 20th of March.
13th,
We usually start at 6:30.
30th, 6:30. Okay. All right, and I'll loop Peter in on that as well. And I'll CC you in on that as
Thank
well
you.
to make sure we're all on the same page.
And then I have to talk to the town administrator because we do have a $35,000 earmark. Except now the machines on the top of the roof cost $75,000, so that's sort of not helpful. But we have to see if we can find maybe some leftover ARPA funds, or if we can fit it into the budget to be able to add that so that we can take advantage of that earmark. And I hate to give money back.
Agreed. Legislative agent, I already gave my report. Single signature warrants.
There is a warrant circulating for signatures totaling $184,699.68, which I will bring to the town tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Any update on CASA events? Seeing none tonight. On to the principal's report.
Happy to talk on behalf of
Thank you,
Mr.
Christine.
Nato, who's not here this evening. Very happy to share our halftime EL teacher has started working at the Dennett. Eva Grecki is our new EL teacher. She's been working very hard to get the access testing done for our students. Timing was nice. The state allotted us a little bit of an extended window. So we're hopeful that that process will be tied up for us pretty soon. The school recently had data meetings with the classroom teachers where we reviewed all the benchmark data for the winter that was conducted. CASA provided a wonderful luncheon for us the Wednesday before February break, which we all really enjoyed and appreciated. We also had a big rocks day on the Friday before vacation. A number of things happened on Valentine's Day. The kids had filled up the big fish bowl, so we wanted to make it kind of a big day going into vacation. We had the students give out golden tickets, so each student got 5 golden tickets to give to a staff member that they caught showing rocks behavior. They would give a ticket and tell this professional why they received the ticket. We had 3 different staff members get awards as part of that in our big assembly, so that was really fun. So Mrs. Fuller was recognized, Mrs. Goodman was recognized, as was Miss George. They also watched the Slime in Space video as part of their lunch, which they really enjoyed. It was probably the quietest lunch we've ever had ever. At the end of the day, we did a school-wide Dennett domino. So we asked students and families who could to send in cereal boxes. We made a huge domino for those who didn't see it. We did try to share that out a couple different ways. It was so much fun. We had 237 boxes of cereal that we then took to all different food pantries in the local communities and donated those leading up to vacation. So that was pretty great. In other news, we have our talent show that is coming up. It's already this Friday. It came in pretty hot. So that's at the Silver Lake Middle School. Tickets are on sale already. Doors open at 5:30. They sold out. Wow.
So it is at the middle school. The
It is at the
venue is
middle
still the
school.
middle school for this
It's still the
Friday.
middle school, and evidently we are sold out. So sorry if you didn't get tickets. It's a hot event, I guess. But thank you to all the families too who helped to make that possible. Also wanted to share that the water room improvements that were scheduled, those are completed. That was finished over February break, so that should be all set. And that's it for the principal's report.
And do you know, does that include the additional potential improvements in there, or is that something we don't know?
It was just the alarm.
Just the
Yeah.
alarm?
It's
Oh,
put in.
oh, finally.
Yeah.
Is that what the red alarm is?
Yeah, now we have the red alarm.
Oh, the
on
kids
the
were
side.
asking. So when you're walking out, you can see the red alarm right outside the water room.
So when it floods, the alarm goes off so we know instead of walking
It's not
into
the
needing
flood, it's
water?
only if there's
Yeah,
caustic
okay.
chemicals. Oh, it's not
Caustic
caustic.
chemicals.
It's a caustic alarm, I think, more, not the flooding.
But we did put an alarm for flooding, right?
The flooding is just obvious.
Well, yes, but
We've had it happen.
it was an interesting day. All right.
I'm going to move on to the Director of Finance and Operations, Sarah.
Thank you. The financial report was in your packet for tonight. As I was preparing my comments for the meeting, the lines that I would talk about were the exact same as what I said last time we met. I'd be happy to read that through again for you if you would like, or we can not waive the reading if you'd like.
Just any new areas of concern, Sarah?
Nothing new. Again, the special education, tuition, transportation, and contracted services are paid out of the operating budget, the circuit breaker account, and the 240 grant. And so the special ed bookkeeper gives me a spreadsheet to prepare for the meeting, and there is a approximately $75,000 deficit at this time, and that is on the spreadsheet that I shared with you yesterday about the FY25 budget. So that includes the nursing contracted services.
And I saw that moved a little bit, but we're still in the $50,000 range.
Yes.
I don't think that my bookkeeper has applied the $37,255.
No, she didn't apply that, but it's on the spreadsheet offset for the,
Because the note that I sent it to both of you.
Yep.
The little note that
But
says
we're not
that.
gonna count it twice. We're not gonna
No.
count it here and
No.
then on the spreadsheet.
I sent you a
So it's-
screenshot of it.
Yeah,
Count it
yeah.
twice. That's a good plan, not to count it twice.
Well,
All right.
and then as far as grants
Sorry, I did
donation.
appreciate the update though to the current FY25 budget deficit that we're facing, and it's around $51,000 at
Yeah.
this point right now. So thank you for updating that sheet for us.
And then the second part, the grants, donations, and awards, there were none for this month. So,
Okay.
I'm done.
And
Thank you, Sarah.
And just so that we're all on the same page, we'll put a warrant in for the special town meeting, and we will likely leave the number blank.
And vote on.
And that way we can do our last back of envelope calculation shortly before the meeting and make sure that we don't take any more than we need to. But we'll make sure we have that in there.
Agreed. All right, Dr. Clifford.
Okay, so just a few things. The literacy needs assessment that I spoke about earlier was conducted, and the Hill for Literacy met with the group of folks that are part of the district literacy leadership team on January 23rd and went over the findings. Teachers were interviewed, there was a survey, there were inventories, all kinds of data gathered. And they shared their findings, and also each individual school, the Hill for Literacy shared the findings with each individual school. And on March 6th, that group, the DLLT, is going to meet at the high school, and we're going to work with Hill to come up with a literacy plan that will probably span at least the next 3 years, and outline action items and a timeline and who's responsible for different things, basically under the following categories: leadership, tiered instructional model, professional learning, assessment, and family engagement. So those are basically the categories, and then action items under each one of those things. So I'm really excited for March 6th. It's going to be a big day. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'll update you on that after the plan is created. The other piece is the math steering committee. So there's a K-6 core review team looking at math programs, iReady and HMH. Both meets across the board on Curate, which is DESI's vehicle for rating different programs. And grade 7 and 8, they're also looking for a new program too, and also looking for one that meets across the board. So those groups have been meeting. The K-6 group meets tomorrow, and we continue to work on that. and I'll be back to update you on that more. Another piece is for social studies, we applied for a 1-8 grant for 5th and 6th grade to begin implementing the investigating history curriculum next year in 25 and 26. This grant would help with professional learning opportunities for 5th and 6th grade teachers, and we've partnered with 1-8 before for Open SciEd. So those are some highlights.
Awesome. Any questions? Seeing none. Anything else from the administration before we adjourn this evening? We really appreciate the work you put into the budget and going line by line through to make sure we have everything we need for our kids here at the Dennett. Just some dates to remember. We have 2 early release dates in March. It's pretty much the only relief the kids get until April vacation. One of them is on March 6th, and the other one is on March 20th, and those are both at 12:30 after lunch is served. We have a joint meeting tomorrow night to go over the shared cost budget, again in the large group room upstairs above the library at the high school at 5 o'clock. And the next Plympton School Committee meeting is on Monday, March 24th. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Everyone in favor? All right, let's get out of here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.